Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start there. You're sometimes we don't agree on stuff, but I got to tell you, on the ICC, you got it exactly right. Your characterization of it being shameful equivalence that they have engaged in yesterday is actually stunning. As you know, in the last administration, the Trump people did an executive order to do sanctions on certain members of the ICC who were investigating us for things that happened in Afghanistan. President Biden's administration came in and dissolved that executive order, as you know. For your information, you probably know about this, but there's a number of us up here that are working on a legislative approach to this that includes not only the Afghanistan question, but also includes the question of the ICC sticking its nose in the business of countries that have an independent, legitimate, democratic judicial system. And obviously, they violated that yesterday. Can you support this? Obviously, you want to see the devil's in the details, obviously, in the legislation, but do you think you can support a legislative approach to this?
Senator Risch, in short, let's look at it. We want to work with you on a bipartisan basis to find an appropriate response. I'm committed to doing that. As you say, the devil's in the details, so let's see what you got, and we can take it from there. But I think from our perspective, going back in lifting sanctions that were previously implemented, the intent, the purpose was to find the best way to protect our service members who served in Afghanistan, and we believe that we did that. But given the events of yesterday, I think we have to look at the appropriate steps to take to deal with, again, what is a profoundly wrong-headed decision.
Well, thank you. As I said, your coinage of that as a shameful equivalence, I think, is a good starting point for all of us, and it really, really deserves our attention. So we're going to spend some time on that, and I hope we can work together on that. Let's shift to China for a minute. Obviously, the biggest problem we have. In April, you said China was the primary contributor to Russia's military complex, and the U.S. has strong evidence China is providing drone and missile technology, satellite imagery, machine tools, and other items that aid Moscow's defense buildup. Are you still of that frame of mind?
Yes.
In that regard, what plans do you have for this? Help me out here. Where are we headed with this? I think you got it right. What do we do about it?
So two things. First, just to be very clear what we're talking about. We have not seen China provide actual weapons to Russia for use in Ukraine. North Korea is doing that. Iran is doing that. China is not. What we are seeing is China provide overwhelming support to Russia's defense industrial base. 70% of the machine tools that Russia's importing are coming from China. 90% of the microelectronics that Russia's importing coming from China. And a lot of that goes to building up the defense industrial base. And we've seen as a result, Russia churning out tanks, artillery, ammunition at a record pace. So, two things. We have, first of all, identified this and called this out directly with China when I was there a few weeks ago with President Xi as well as with the Foreign Minister, Wang Yi. We've called it out publicly. We brought the information to allies and partners. And it's very clear that particularly for the Europeans, who see in Russia's aggression against Ukraine a larger threat to their own security, because if it doesn't stop at Ukraine, it is very much likely to continue elsewhere in Europe. You can't have China, on the one hand, professing to seek better relations with countries in Europe, while on the other hand, fueling the greatest security threat to Europe since the end of the Cold War. And in my conversations with European leaders, as we shared this information with them, it's clear that that's exactly the way they see it, and I am confident they're engaging China on that basis. What we've done and what we need to continue to do. One is we've already sanctioned more than 100 Chinese entities that we've identified that were engaged in providing dual-use products, other things that are on sanctions lists. We will continue to do that. And we're working to coordinate our efforts with European and other partners who are also aggrieved, in fact, in many ways, even more aggrieved by this practice because it's a direct threat to them.
Well, thank you. When you're sitting across the table from the Chinese and you call them out on this, what do they say? Mind your own business? What's their position on this?
Oh, their position is that they're engaged in perfectly normal legal trade.
Yeah. Well, and that brings me to something else that we know that they're lusting over in a perfectly legal manner, and that is they want to be involved in the peace process for Ukraine, and we all know why. They're going to descend like locusts in a plague on Ukraine when this is over with, and it's going to be over with, and Ukraine's going to need a tremendous amount of rebuilding. They want to participate in that. Your thoughts on that?
Well, if that's their intent, I don't think they're doing themselves any favor by helping to feed the Russian war machine. And I don't think that will be looked kindly upon by Ukrainians when the day comes when there is peace and a strong sovereign Ukraine is fully engaged in rebuilding from what Russia's done to it.
Have the Europeans expressed to you, as they have to a number of us, their concerns about a Chinese involvement in rebuilding Ukraine?
I have to say that's not something that I think has come up that I recall in discussions, but I'm pretty confident that given the support that China is providing to Russia, it's not something that will be looked kindly upon by the Ukrainians themselves.
In a few minutes I got left, I want to talk about my Repo Act. You know, we got a lot of pushback on that when it started, but amazingly, most everyone's come around, even our friends in Germany who originally said absolutely not, are now at least got one foot on board. The Belgians, of course, who have most of the assets, really have come up with some innovative ways to do this. What are you hearing on that?
Well, first of all, I applaud you for what you did with that, for the leadership on that. It's made a big difference. Two things. Just today, the European Union has gone ahead and approved the use of the interest, profits from the sovereign assets that are in Europe for Ukraine. Now, it's a step, but it's an important step.
And I don't disagree with that. When I met with them, they talked about the difference between the principal and interest. Yeah. And I guess I'm not a banker, but once an interest is earned, in my judgment, it becomes part of the principal. So I don't understand if they can use the principal or the interest, why they can't use the principal. But aside from that, their view when I talked to them was they can use the interest for a long, long time. It's fine. Yep. It sits there forever. It's fine.
And now the EU,
whatever the solution, I'm all in.
So the EU's done that. But to your point, Senator, I think there are other possibilities that we're driving toward, including looking at ways to collateralize the principal. Yeah. And to use that as the basis for a loan, for a bond that would generate a lot more resources for Ukraine up front.
Very good. My time's up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.